We live in rapidly changing times with an urgent need to question old ideas and develop new ones. And while we may not always agree on which ideas are best to turn into reality, here today, I think I would be pretty safe to say that we all believe that there is a need for innovation to tackle the big challenges of our time: energy access, affordability, security, while avoiding catastrophic climate change. The first session today is aimed at creating a spark for the discussions that will follow out throughout the day. We'll hear from 3 distinguished speakers at the start, and then we'll hear from 3 innovators who are turning ideas into reality. So with that, let me first invite the Honorable Minister Tim Hodson, the Minister of Energy and Natural Resources for Canada. He has held wide-ranging roles across business and government, and he is the co-host of today's forum, and he will be co-chairing tomorrow's G7 Energy and Environment Ministerial here in Toronto. Minister, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Hopefully you're all not too sleepy from watching the Blue Jays last night. That was a good game. Good morning, bonjour à tous, and welcome to Toronto. It's a privilege to welcome you to this year's International Energy Agency Energy Innovation Forum, a gathering of thinkers, doers, and builders shaping our energy future. Let me begin by thanking Dr. Barrault and the IEA for choosing Canada to host this forum and for continuing to champion the belief that innovation will play a critical role to enable faster and more affordable transition to a secure, sustainable energy sector. Toronto feels like the perfect place to have this conversation. This city, which I call home, and is home to the Blue Jays, is a microcosm of what energy innovation should look like: diverse, dynamic, entrepreneurial, and connected to the world, and good at baseball. I hope being here today inspires you to drive progress forward and deepen collaboration across international lines. Ladies and gentlemen, we are gathered here today at a turning point. Energy markets are being reshaped by geopolitical conflict, technological revolutions, and an accelerating drive towards net zero. Citizens of the world require secure, affordable access to energy. Investors are seeking clarity and confidence to deploy capital, and governments are working to deliver both climate ambition and economic growth. I believe this encompasses the defining challenge of our generation: how to align innovation with inclusion, technological advancement with trust, and economic competitiveness with climate responsibility. Canada's message entering into the G7 Energy and Environmental Ministers meeting tomorrow is that we can do this if we work together. That prosperity, security, and sustainability are not competing goals, but mutually reinforcing opportunities we must capture for the world. This is not a brand new idea. In fact, in many ways, it was first born in the G7's response to the energy crisis of the 1970s. But it remains as relevant as ever, if not more. In this hinge moment, it's hard to think of a more crucial topic for the world than energy innovation. In moments of rapid change, energy innovation can be the backbone of prosperity, security, and climate credibility. For Canada, it's how we keep our lights on through harsh winters, how we aim to power AI data centers we want to build responsibly, and how we will deliver power to industry and manufacturing while meeting our climate commitments. Innovation is not only about inventing new technology, it's also about scaling that technology in the real world and doing it faster, with lower cost and lower risk, while maintaining public trust. Canada's innovation ambition is straightforward. Build the most reliable, affordable, low-carbon energy system in the world, and export the know-how, technology, and resources that make it possible to strengthen economic opportunity for Canada and its allies. We will lead by building modern, integrated, and flexible grids that can move clean electrons where they're needed, when they're needed. We will lead by rapidly building new low-carbon power generation through new nuclear plant life extensions and the world's first small modular reactors used on a commercial basis, and by responsibly developing our natural gas with abatement technologies and with the integration of grid-scale storage in our systems. We will lead by working with the private sector to accelerate electrification for vehicles, buildings, and industry, while supporting the fuel feedstocks like clean hydrogen and sustainable biofuels necessary to transform heavy transport and hard-to-abate sectors. Domestically, we are focusing on 3 levers. First, creating an environment of regulatory certainty, which requires predictable policies, faster timelines, and reliable permitting. We are working with our provinces and territories, our Indigenous partners, utilities, and regulators to cut timelines without cutting corners, because speed and integrity must travel together. Second, we're focused on the use of financial tools that crowd in private capital, tactically using public dollars, de-risking first-of-a-kind projects, supporting supply chains that provide critical inputs for important industries, and backing industrial decarbonization so our economy stays competitive and Canadian products compete and win in a low-carbon world. This morning, we just heard that NorthX Climate Tech, a Canadian organization supported by my ministry, NRCan, is focused on accelerating clean energy breakthroughs, and we highlighted our investment of $3.4 million into 4 emerging carbon dioxide removal technology ventures. We also announced that an early NorthX investee, ARCA, has now signed one of the world's largest carbon dioxide removal offtake deals with Microsoft, an example of Canadian clean tech that benefit from strategic injection of seed capital at the outset and has now scaled to become a serious global player in the CDR space, creating jobs and bringing financial growth back home to Canada. This speaks to a particular success and ongoing focus of this new government in carbon management, a crucially important energy innovation. Beyond typical government funding to spur carbon management innovation, we have set up a first-of-a-kind Canadian carbon capture, utilization, and storage investment tax credit. Among the full suite of other clean economy investment tax credits, which apply to industries like clean manufacturing, technology, electricity generation, hydrogen generation, the CCUS ITC is playing an essential role in attracting investment, supporting Canadian innovation, creating jobs, and driving Canada's economy toward net zero by 2050. To build on the momentum created by the ITC and other federal projects, I'm also announcing over $11 million of investment in CCUS technology companies in our provinces of Newfoundland and Quebec. Now I'll turn to the third lever we're focused on, data and digital. From high-resolution resource mapping to grid digitalization and AI-enabled operations. We are turning Canada's energy data into strategic assets with targeted public investments that catalyze the private sector to do more and to do it faster. This brings me to where Canada sees the next frontier of energy innovation, the intersection of AI and energy. Because if energy powered the first industrial revolution and data powered the second revolution, then AI and intelligence will power the next revolution. The integration of data, machine learning, and human ingenuity across every part of the energy system. AI is already reshaping how we produce, move, and consume energy. It is helping operators predict grid demand in real time, accelerating materials discovery for better batteries, and optimizing renewable energy like wind farms, all great examples. But as AI's real potential is not just in individual use cases. It is in the ability to learn from millions of data points across sectors to stimulate years of R&D in just hours, and to link innovation ecosystems that have historically worked in isolation. At its best, AI will make our energy systems smarter, faster, and more resilient, reducing waste, improving reliability, and freeing up human capacity for creative problem solving. And we know that with new power comes new responsibilities. The future of economic prosperity and security will be determined by AI and quantum technologies. From healthcare to defense to public services, they will transform how governments serve Canadians. Canada and our G7 allies need to secure their place as pioneering leaders in both fields of AI and quantum computing and build on our competitive advantages in research, talent, and energy. I promise you Canada will do our part and more. Speaking of energy, AI will shape not just how we generate and store energy, but also how we govern it. This includes how we manage data sovereignty, protect privacy, and ensure that these systems serve the public good, not just private interests. That's why Canada is taking deliberate steps to ensure trustworthy, affordable, and energy-efficient AI is baked into how we move forward, and it's not an afterthought. We intend to share this work with our allies. This is why in the G7 discussions tomorrow and Friday, Canada will use our presidency to advance a shared G7 framework that ensures energy and AI are harnessed responsibly, strengthening the G7 nations' competitiveness while protecting security and democratic standards. We are backing that up with real action here at home. We have our first Minister of Artificial Intelligence and Digital Innovation in this government. We are partnering with countries like the UK and the UAE and leading AI companies like Cohere, based right here in Toronto. And we're developing an AI strategy with a recently launched AI strategy task force, which includes experts from industry, academia, and civil society to shape it. Building on that today, I'm pleased to be launching the Artificial Intelligence for Canadian Energy Innovation Call for Proposals. The call for proposals will be made through my ministry, Natural Resources Canada. Projects funded under this call will catalyze the development of novel Canadian-made AI solutions and build directly on the commitments made at the G7 Leaders Summit in Kananaskis, Alberta this summer, where nations agreed that harnessing AI responsibly is essential to energy security and economic competitiveness. Each of these stories, from AI research to CCUS projects to new private sector deals, forms part of a much larger narrative. It is a narrative that demonstrates that the scope of energy innovation is getting bigger, whether it's using AI or new tech for carbon dioxide removal, which means that economic opportunities for energy innovation are growing. Across the board, there is recognition of the need, urgency, and opportunities of innovation, and that growth will require more collaboration networks than ever before, stretching across universities, startups, entire regions, and indeed the G7. I would suggest to this audience that building that network is what this Energy Innovation Forum is all about, bringing the best and brightest together to share ideas and accelerate real action. And when today's forum wraps up, it will not be the end of the work. I am pleased to announce that in June of 2026, Canada will host the 11th IEA Global Conference on Energy Efficiency in Montreal. Efficiency, often called the first fuel, is the fastest, cheapest way to cut emissions while boosting growth. Every unit we save strengthens competitiveness, lowers bills, and eases pressures on grids. For Canada, energy efficiency is an industrial strategy. Modernize codes that make buildings comfortable and affordable. Public retrofits so our infrastructure remains resilient, and smart standards that help households and businesses both save money and cut emissions. Globally, energy efficiency unites producers and consumer nations alike. It is where climate ambition meets energy security and affordability. In Montreal, we will gather leaders to discuss how we can reduce demand without reducing opportunity, so our families save, our industries grow, and grids stay stable as electrification accelerates. To conclude, as we begin this year's forum and move forward, the G7 meeting beginning tomorrow, I want to leave you with a simple message. Talking about innovation and connecting with potential new partners is important, but innovation is not just about ideas. It's about implementation. We need to take the best ideas out of the labs and off the test sites and get them into the hands of the people who can use them. The engineers, the entrepreneurs, the industries and communities we all serve. Because ultimately, innovation is much more than a story of technology. It's a story about human ambition, about people who ask, what if? What if we could build energy systems that power our economies without compromising our planet? What if we could harness artificial intelligence to make discovery faster, manufacturing cleaner, and grids more reliable? Every generation faces a moment when technology, capital, and conscience intersect. This is our moment. So as we embark on this year's Energy Innovation Forum, let's make a promise to ourselves and to each other that when the world looks back on this moment, they will say this is when we stopped debating what might be possible and start delivering on what we know is necessary. It's time to get serious about building an energy future that provides prosperity for not just the next 4 years, but for 4 decades. A future that is secure, affordable, and sustainable. We are fortunate to have a convener like the IEA to push the agenda forward. And Canada is ready to do its part by partnering, investing, and leading with urgency and purpose. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup, and hope you have a very good forum today.
Thank you for those remarks, Minister. Those are good words to get us going for this day. Next, I'd like to invite Dr. Timur Gul. He's the IEA's Chief Energy Technology Officer, and many of you already know him. If you don't, I can guarantee you that you've read his work, because he's responsible for the IEA's Energy Technology Perspectives and the IEA's Technology Collaboration Network. Dr. Gul, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Akshat, for the kind introduction. Minister Hodgson, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It's a real honor for the International Energy Agency to be co-hosting the second IEA Energy Innovation with the Government of Canada. A really great privilege to do that here in Toronto. I think the Minister already spoke at length about the Blue Jays, but there's a lot more to do in this particular town, I believe. Even though I was very impressed last night, I cannot say any different there. But I'm a football fan, no, not baseball, but still very impressive. Anyway, just to say, the IEA was obviously, many of you know that, established just over 50 years ago in the wake of the global oil crisis, with a mandate to facilitate global energy dialogue. And technology innovation was one of the core themes of this global energy dialogue from the beginning, as the founding members of the IEA identified it as a key way to enhance energy security. But technology innovation is about more than energy security alone. In today's global context, in particular, technology innovation is fundamental to many central policy objectives of governments. There's energy security, of course, but also economic growth, industrial competitiveness, affordability, climate change, and environmental sustainability. In other words, innovation is not a matter of RD&D alone. Innovation is all about sound energy and industrial policy making. Getting better and faster at technology innovation is today more important than ever, and so it's perhaps quite fitting that this year's Nobel Prize of Economics was awarded to academics whose work focuses on innovation-led economic growth. One of them is actually from Canada, our co-host of today, and so I'd like to congratulate Canada for this outstanding recognition. At the IEA, we have stepped up our efforts on energy technology innovation over the past decade since our executive director, Dr. Fatih Birol, implemented his modernization strategy for the IEA. We've deepened our analytical efforts across all technologies, from batteries to electric cars, from renewables to nuclear SMRs, from hydrogen to carbon capture utilization and storage, and from artificial intelligence to all aspects of technology hardware. Over the past 5 years, since 2020, at the IEA, we have been starting to track innovation progress for more than 600 different energy technologies and components through our online tool called Clean Energy Technology Guide. There's a big team at the IEA headquarters in Paris listening to us right now. They are putting a lot of effort into putting this database online, making it available for you so that you're all aware of technology progress across the entire energy spectrum. We also maintain a global database with demonstration projects and have more recently established a new annual comprehensive State of Energy Innovation report, which is going to be the subject of a session later today. The opportunity to gather here today with such an exceptional group of high-level experts and practitioners for a day of what we hope are practical discussions, not announcements, but real practical discussions, and in the context of the G7 Ministerial meeting, is, in my view, truly unique and linked to these efforts that we've been undertaking at IEA to step up our work on innovation, on energy innovation. This is the second forum. The first ever IEA Energy Innovation Forum was held in Paris in 2024 in February at the margins of the IEA Ministerial and at the request of G7 leaders during Japan's G7 presidency. Among the key objectives of that particular forum and also of today's discussion was to give the entire innovation ecosystem a voice with governments, including in particular startups from around the world, many of which are represented here today and which are the nucleus in many ways of tomorrow's change in the energy sector. Today, you as participants in this forum represent around 30 countries. You represent technologies that range all the way from nuclear fusion to heat pumps for space and industrial heating, from battery technologies to copper mining, and you come from the diverse worlds of government, research, business, finance, and startups. You have all been invited because you're dedicated to innovation, dedicated to helping innovators to experiment and manage risks, to bring impactful technologies successfully to the market, and to go beyond the first-of-a-kind milestone. At the IEA, we believe very strongly that it's important for all of you, for the entire innovation ecosystem, to contribute to the conversation about how to accelerate innovation progress and give high potential technologies the best chance of success. 50 years ago, in 1975, so just the year after the IEA was established, the IEA created technology-specific platforms for this type of international exchange, and I'm really delighted to see that many representatives from our 38 so-called technology collaboration programs are on the list of participants today as well. So I hope you agree that the topics of today's forum resonate with this particular moment in time. We look forward to hearing your views on how first-of-a-kind projects can be kept on track, on how AI can accelerate energy innovation, on battery mineral supplies, on policies to scale up carbon dioxide removal, and on the innovation needs of developing economies and those like Ukraine that are facing urgent energy security challenges. As co-hosts, we from the IEA look very much forward to hearing from as many of you as possible during the day. As I said, it is important for all of you to be heard in this particular environment. We hope it will be a very full day of both work and networking. The discussions that we'll be having here today will be reported back by the IEA Executive Director to the G7 Ministerial meeting that is taking place tomorrow and the day after. I will now hand the word back to our capable moderator, Akshat, who has kindly accepted to take on this important role for the second time. So thank you very much, Akshat, for being with us today, and thank you to all of you for doing the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kuhl. Today's keynote speaker is John Stackhouse. He's the Senior Vice President in the CEO's office at the Royal Bank of Canada. His remarks today will help us draw the links between the major themes at the forum: energy, finance, AI, critical minerals, and more. Mr. Stackhouse, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Thank you, Akshat. Such an honor to be with you all here today. Thank you to the IEA for helping put this on, and to the Government of Canada and NRCan and Minister Hodgson for your leadership. You're probably tired of hearing about the Blue Jays, but hey, you're in our town, so get used to it. What the minister didn't stress is, if you're not watching baseball this week, you're seeing something historic, which is the grittiest team in baseball taking on the biggest payroll, most confident team in baseball. I'll leave it to others to say whether there's a metaphor there for other dialogue going on, but go Jays. The work you're all doing to help set the agenda for energy technology, frankly, has never been more important and really more urgent. And the same urgency needs to be applied to the spirit of multilateral cooperation, which will be essential in the years ahead when it comes to our collective security, our economic security, and yes, our energy security. None of us, even though we may want to, can do it on our own. As you all know, we live in a new era of urgency in which ambitions are growing and horizons are shrinking. A bit of context: it took about 15 years for semiconductors to change the world. It took about 5 years for the internet to really reset the course of economies. Gen AI has had the same effect in about 15 months. Everything around us is, yes, getting more compressed. I was reminded of this last week on a trip to Silicon Valley, where I got to meet with a number of senior executives, and a couple of them said the same thing about time and compression. When we talked about long-term perspectives, they both said separately, you know, long-term now is 6 months. Anything beyond next April, that's well over the horizon of long-term. That's just the way the world is going. We live in a time of unprecedented change and unprecedented compression. And we live in a world that's being restructured, in our view, by 3 defining forces that I'll discuss this morning. These forces are converging to redefine how nations, markets, and societies operate, and they are all connected by energy. I work at RBC, very privileged to do so. We're one of the world's 15 largest banks, and in fact, with HSBC, we're the only non-American, non-Chinese bank in that category. We're also one of the world's largest energy banks, so I'll try to bring some of what we're seeing to the fore here and speak to these three megaforces. The first megaforce of the 2020s, no surprise to this room, is technology, especially frontier technology. Right now, roughly 45% of the S&P 500 is composed of the AI hyperscaler stocks, close to half of the value of that important market. These hyperscalers are spending more than $500 billion a year, and collectively that's rising. Over the next 3 years, that could amount to $1.5 trillion. This vastly overshadows another great force that has affected everyone in this room, which was only just a few years ago, and that was the Inflation Reduction Act, which managed to catalyze about $500 billion over a few years. This is a huge concentration of capital and is leading to big swings for good and maybe not so good, depending on your perspective, around the world. But energy is essential to that growth because you don't scale, you don't certainly hyperscale without a lot of energy, especially a new quantum of secure energy. Security in energy is critical to that. The second megaforce is the growing geopolitical divisions over trade. Global trade as a percentage of GDP grew steadily following the Second World War from about 10% to a height of about 60% around the time of the great financial crisis. It's come down to around the mid-50s. It's going to dip down a bit more over the next year as global growth slows and as trade frictions grow. We don't see an end to globalization, but we are all seeing and part of a reglobalization that is going to lead to further capital shifts and a demand for more energy innovation that is on par to what came out of the great economic shifts when China joined the WTO. So again, a major epic shift underway that is going to affect energy demand. Why? Because countries trading less inherently need more of their own energy, or at least energy from a smaller range of reliable allied suppliers. So bring on innovation wherever you are in the world. Third big force that is that we've entered a new security paradigm in which defense, and we count space as part of national defense now, will be a major claim on both public and private capital in this more fractured, uncertain, and conflicted world. Increased defense and security needs are top of mind for most governments, certainly the ones that would speak for the people in this room. And as you all know, defense supremacy requires energy. NATO countries are targeting spending on defense and security to be 5% of GDP by the mid-2030s. This is an extraordinary shift in capital allocation. That's an annual spend of roughly $2 trillion a year, and this will be in a lot of societies that are losing productive capacity and aging, and therefore will have other social claims. But critically, these forces point to a clear global need for low-cost, accessible, reliable energy. You cannot have all that defense apparatus and investment without new energy systems. You can't have security, in fact, in the 2020s and certainly not in the 2030s with, I think as the minister said, without three key ingredients. It's data, critical minerals, and energy. The contests of the 2030s will be defined by access and advancement and innovation of those three forces. Every major advancement in AI is going to rely on enormous computing power. You all know that by the mid-2030s, global data center power demand is expected to reach 1,500 terawatts. That equals the current power needs of Germany, the UK, and France. Just this week, the US government announced a massive partnership with Brookfield Asset Management, Cameco, and Westinghouse Electric to accelerate the deployment of nuclear power, in part because of America's ambition for AI supremacy. Nations and companies that secure abundant and ideally low-carbon power will control that digital future. I stress low carbon because renewables are still the cheapest form of electricity generation. I stress low carbon because carbon power because nuclear is the most energy dense and increasingly the most adaptable with the advent of SMRs. And low carbon power because big tech remains committed to procuring affordable, reliable, and low carbon over the medium to long term. So for the G7, we think low carbon power can be a competitive advantage and a key to that security imperative. Nations that master the ability to generate, store, and distribute these diverse power sources locally will also reduce security vulnerability. From drones, sensors, and cyber defense, modern militaries are increasingly electrified and digitized. And in an economic environment that can feel more like a battlefield than a marketplace, energy self-sufficiency will reduce exposure to price shocks as well as geopolitical shocks. Nations that master the next generation energy technologies, think large-scale battery storage or carbon removal and storage, will govern the industries of the future. The competition for these industries may be won by those that have access. The competition for these industries may be won by those that have secure, affordable access to those three power sources: data, energy, and critical minerals. The competition, frankly, for those right now is between two great techno powers, the US and China. And to be frank, the US has dominance in two of those three areas: data, energy, and critical minerals. China is on its way to having security in all three. Through collaboration, the G7 and certainly the G7 Plus can have an overwhelming security of all three: of data, of energy, and of critical minerals. But we need to be faster, faster, and faster. Back to that Silicon Valley ethos of time. For energy, faster means removing frictions to key inputs traded across our nations and within our nations. Faster means removing our own internal frictions across the developed world that simply takes too long to build major projects. We're coming to grips with that here in Canada, but none of us, I don't think, have found a way to disrupt NIMBYism. But if we do, removing these frictions can quicken development, reduce uncertainty, improve economics, and unlock capital to move in both speed and scale. Faster, faster, faster. That's what is needed to keep pace with the speed in which our energy systems are transforming. Systems that used to evolve over decades now need to reinvent themselves and advance themselves in just a few years. Unfortunately, energy efficiency, as the minister said, the first fuel, has stalled over the past decade. Improvements in energy efficiency are not what they used to be. Grid modernization, renewables integration, and EV infrastructure must scale faster than any energy transformation that any of us have seen. Supply chains for lithium, nickel, and rare earths are being rebuilt in real time to reduce our dependence on China. But are we moving fast enough, and how can we move faster? A collaborative approach to responsible resource development across the G7 Plus can be streamlined with similar approaches or aligned approaches to regulations, standards, and financing to mobilize cross-border flows. But let's not fool ourselves. Retooling energy systems at breakneck speed is not cheap. 10 years ago, the conditions for all of this were frankly more accommodating. We had low-cost capital. We had more fiscal capacity for subsidies. We had more aligned policy support around the world and more favorable market conditions. All those made clean energy projects financially attractive and relatively low risk. Today, we're looking at higher long-term interest rates, trade frictions, and inflationary supply chain pressures, all of which have made the same investment environment more challenging. And that presents a dilemma. Sustainable energy investments for all of the above could require capital in the magnitude of $2 trillion a year globally. That's a huge quantum. But that capital is out there waiting to be deployed, especially if there is more certainty and confidence in our markets. And that's at the heart of our collective energy innovation challenge. Venture capital and private equity, as two examples, are needed to drive innovation and new technologies ahead of proof of concept, or beyond proof of concept. But we've reached a point where demonstration projects are too expensive for traditional VC and too risky for mainstream capital. This is the challenge known as the missing middle of capital, and something we have to come to grips with, and that the G7 Plus does bring some competitive advantages to. So yes, it's a challenge, also an opportunity. While China has become a global trading nation and clean tech leader, the G7 Plus still dominates capital flows. G7 currencies account for 85% of global foreign exchange volumes and dominate the $12 trillion in global currency reserves. We have competitive advantages here. And a lot of that capital, public and private, is flowing towards these opportunities, especially around that security imperative. Just think of how much has changed in the past 6 months, aka the new long term. First, governments, many of our governments, are now investors. We've seen the Pentagon create what's essentially a private equity firm. Don't think any of us had that on our bingo card a year ago. That's a firm signal that governments will take more active roles as procurers, capital allocators, and resource captors to ensure their economic prosperity and energy and resource security. The Canadian government is standing up a new defense investment agency with similar ambitions and will likely be using key financing arms to direct more venture capital to defense, space, and other security needs, which can and arguably should include energy and critical minerals. Secondly, we're seeing much more assertive and strategic approaches to procurement, including indications from some key allies to create strategic reserves of critical minerals, secure supply chains for energy infrastructure, and approach strategic offtake agreements. Thirdly, we've seen nations explore new ways to use our collective balance sheets. Here's one example. RBC is one of 10 global banks that is helping to stand up a new entity called the Defense, Security, and Resilience Bank, the DSRB, to facilitate capital expenditures across the defense industry, some of which could conceivably be earmarked for energy and mineral development. Think of it as a kind of World Bank for NATO allies or G7 plus allies to focus on defense spending, both from the public and private sector. More on that in the months ahead. This is all part of a new chapter of what some might call state capitalism or public-private capitalism. Certainly, we're seeing a more economically activist state around the world and need to start to harness that. This will be important for the G7 Plus and others to at least monitor, but also possibly coordinate, especially in terms of how markets across our economies can align and connect to facilitate new capital flows to these growing strategic imperatives, including energy and critical minerals. Governments can also bridge market failures specific to regulatory uncertainties, demand, and financing of first-of-a-kind projects. They can procure, finance, and invest. For example, the U.S. Defense Procurement Act Title III allows for funding of critical minerals. We'll likely see that leveraged much more. Here in Canada, public entities like the Canada Infrastructure Bank and Canada Growth Fund can be used to help build out the dual-use infrastructure for energy, minerals, and defense. The same opportunity exists for business development banks and export finance agencies across the G7+, to help underwrite the risks of new energy ventures as part of a bigger security strategy. It's these new approaches to finance, ideally through public and private cooperation, that can unleash, in our view, new waves of capital for this new imperative of energy security. And we can do it with that Silicon Valley speed. Consider this, in 2022, climate tech, private equity, and VC outraised defense tech at a scale of 7-to-1. That was only 3 years ago. This year, the two are essentially even. Next year, I think you all know where the puck is going. For emerging climate tech ventures, tapping into this new paradigm of defense and security capital may be the key to the next few years of global innovation. There isn't time to wait to see how it plays out. Technology is moving fast, geopolitics are shifting, and a new map of global security is taking shape. Climate security and clean tech can and must be part of that. Energy and critical minerals will be the ink on that map, and the G7+ and the innovators in this room have the chance to help draw it. Thank you all, and look forward to your discussions today and the innovation that you're going to bring to the world in the years ahead.
Thank you. So in the room today, there are many who work on innovation, on new technologies, and those who are looking to make it a commercial success. Next, we are going to hear from 3 of those innovators trying to do just that. So please welcome Lutza Mizzosi, Donna, Philip Hublik, and Amanda Hall to the stage. So I think first it would be a good quick round of telling us what company you work for and what is the innovation you're bringing. So maybe let's start with you, Lutza. You're the co-founder of Ionate. Can you tell us about the innovation and where you are on the journey to deploying it?
Of course. I mean, thank you very much for having us. This room knows better than anybody that the grid is the biggest bottleneck of electrification, decarbonization, and now AI. At Ionate, we like a challenge, so we decided to tackle that. And we're building the hardware-software backbone for the smart grid. A little bit about us. Our hardware is a fundamental innovation to the building blocks of the system, transformers. We turn them into all-in-one smart devices. They go into the grid with big power users like data centers, into generation like renewables, and stabilize power flows, clean up any issues that might arise. But in doing so, they also light up real-time control nodes for the very first time. And once we have a network of them, our AI-enabled software can coordinate them to unlock a system that optimizes itself. So we can have more renewables connecting safely. We can send more power through the existing poles and wires, and we can eliminate losses. It's a true smart system, and that's the vision.
And there is a real shortage of transformers, especially in Western economies. Where are you on the deploying journey?
So we're hopefully at the edge of doing this exactly. We are going into live grids in a couple weeks' time in Spain and Portugal with energy giant EDP, but we're working in partnership with transformer OEM, so we will be able to scale quickly, and our plan is to go into multiple geographies next year.
Wonderful. And Amanda, you are the co-founder of Summit Nanotech. Tell us about your company and where you are on the scale-up journey.
Sure, Akshat. So my story begins in a very remote place at the top of a mountain in a monastery in Tibet, where I saw a monk reach into his robe and pull out a cell phone. And I am shocked at how many people can relate to that story. A lot of people have seen monks with cell phones around the world. But in that moment, as a geophysicist who was working at the time in the oil and gas sector in Canada, I worked for Canadian Natural Resources. I had done a lot of research on the extraction of lithium and how it was done, and essentially 50% of the world's lithium comes from hard rock mines in Australia, so think Fred Flintstone, and the other 50% of the lithium in the world comes from evaporation ponds in South America, which are really just giant tailings ponds where lithium precipitates over time. So our invention, I came down from the mountain, first of all, quit my job in oil and gas, sold my house, and started Summit Nanotech. And what we worked on inventing was a nanomaterial, a particle that pulls lithium out of salt water. And then we can put the rest of the brine or salt water back underground. So it's a much more efficient, effective way of getting lithium out of salt water. We've scaled that tremendously with the help of the Canadian government. I was in the Women in Clean Tech program and won a fair bit of money through that program. And we also got support from NGen to build our first pilot manufacturing line for the sorbent itself. But where we're at today is we just press released actually yesterday our demonstration results with a major mining company called Albemarle, biggest lithium mining company in the world. And we spent a year with them in the beautiful desert in the Atacama in Chile, demonstrating our technology, and the performance was fantastic. So we've raised $90 million to date, and we're still growing, and we're one step away from commercial scale.
Thank you. And Philippe, you are the CEO of PayGas. You've learned about technology, innovation, and the sort of challenges that are needed to bring a new technology on board. Your challenges are a little bit different. Tell us about the company and what challenges you face.
So, what is very important, I think, Amanda, Lucia, from the lithium battery for EV or from the smart grid transformer, we are all solving one big major issue for government with climate change. So the challenge I did for, I wanted to solve this issue 7 years ago, was a double challenge. First challenge was poverty, cooking poverty, and the second one was government issues. Today, half of the population is cooking with wood, charcoal, because of power of purchase. If you want to cook with clean cooking, you need to buy a bottle, and a gas bottle is about $10. Half of the population get less than $5 per day. So that's why they're using wood, charcoal, because they can put in small quantity. So with the technology of pay gas, you can start refill your cooking gas from 50 cents. 50 cents, yes. And the main challenge we got was also to solve the issue for government. Government, because of this massive CO2 emission from cooking with wood and charcoal, you need to see that emission from cooking wood and charcoal is about the same emission level of all the plane, all the ships in the world. So, and those emissions didn't stop at the G7 border. And government were finding solutions to save lives, like subsidy on gas. But it's a high cost for government to put subsidy on gas. And through the technology, now you can remove subsidy because people don't need a full cylinder. They can buy a partial one they can buy from 50 cents. So I think that's what's very important for us. We've got more than 500,000 paying customers from the townships in South Africa, from Brazil soon, from India soon. Everybody will be able to stop deforesting for cooking thanks to the technology.
And in terms of the different ideas that you all are scaling up, I mean, Philippe, you're already at the consumer level. What type of demands did consumers make? And as a result of that, did you have to change what you were doing, had to innovate your way out?
So the first point was to tackle cooking poverty. When people get $2 per day, you can't have a solution with above $2. You need to be below. And so first it was a technology using the pay-as-you-go from South Africa. And the second challenge is regulation. And this is where G7 government can help because pay gas is increasing massively access to clean cooking. But in the same time, we need to have a safe and strong regulation for refilling gas. And one of the best regulation is the one of South Africa, using the British standards with a G7 member. And by deploying the proper regulation, you can access more people. The second point, which is very important, is private investment. One of the biggest partner is the largest mass retailer in Africa, who is co-investing it, not only for the good, but also as a synergy for this business.
And Amanda, there is now a momentum for critical minerals. We've gone through waves of it because the price of critical minerals can vary and vary a lot. Lithium prices have gone up 800% and come down. So when you think about running a startup that has to sustain this in the long run, how do you deal with what would be market forces that can affect your business?
Yeah, it's been a wild ride for the last 7 years. Lithium prices are dramatically influenced by what's going on in China. And so we keep a really close eye on production that they put into the market, what pricing they put on it. It influences what consumers are willing to pay for a ton of lithium. So as a startup company, the best thing we can do is model the future with the worst case scenario possible, and then make sure our economics work in that environment. And so that actually drove our innovation because we knew we had to have our environmental impact had to be lower than the traditional methods, but also our economics, our CapEx and OpEx had to be similar to Philippe, lower than the existing methods, so that there was zero barriers to entry. And then one of the things that we proved with our demonstration with Albemarle is that we use less water and energy than the traditional evaporation ponds. And so that in itself gives us the credibility to step into the market and compete. but we do have to compete against China, and their methods of extraction are not as environmentally friendly as the rest of us, and so it's a tough market to compete against. But quality often outweighs cost in some ways. So if you put a good quality piece of equipment in the field that lasts 20 years and it's easy to operate, that can compete against a cheaper pieces of equipment that's hard to keep running and has to be replaced every few years.
And Lutze, your innovation depends on being able to work with other manufacturers. So transformers is something I've reported on, and there are challenges in the transformer companies wanting to make enough transformers right now. So how do you convince an existing large company that you as a startup deserves a slot in their manufacturing lineup, which is quite squeezed right now?
It's a very good question, Akshat. I mean, one thing to keep in mind in the whole of the power industry, business as usual isn't going to cut it anymore. We can't keep doing the same things. We can't keep deploying the same types of technologies when we've got new challenges. And the customers of these OEMs are now asking for novel technologies to their pain points. So on one hand, they're being pulled by the market to come up with something, but these OEMs are not fast to innovate. And what we give them is a route to market really, really fast. We have done the work, we've got the IP, we can build this together and bring it to market now, and it's a higher margin product for them. It solves the customer's pain point. They can use their existing processes to build it, but build a solution rather than just their usual product.
Wonderful. Well, there are other startups here that I'm sure would want to ask you questions about how the scaling up journey is going. I hope you get a chance to speak to them. Thank you, Lutze, Amanda, and Philippe.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Akshat.
We'll straight go into the second session to keep to time. We're going to focus on the state of energy innovation in 2025. And to kick things off, I'm going to invite Dr. Gul back to the stage again. Is this working? He's going to look at IEA's first report on the state of the energy innovation. Then we'll have some prepared remarks, and I'll open up for discussion so you all can participate. But Dr. Gul, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Akshat. Thanks to our panelists just now. Really interesting insights. I believe what we try to do at the IEA, as you know, is we're trying to get as many data points as we can possibly get to any kind of energy debate. And of course, energy innovation is no exception to that. We've been putting together databases over the years in order to try to bring as much transparency into the innovation space as possible. But we felt that it's time to do an annual report on the state of energy innovation. And if I could just perhaps say a couple of words on why we decided to do that. The main reason here is extremely simple. We figured that over the years, we've been trying to find the go-to place on where we are in terms of innovation progress, but we were unable to find it. And that's the basic motivation of this report. Of course, everyone knows intuitively that technology innovation is important to the energy sector, but it's also notoriously difficult to measure. There are no simple or easy metrics that you can use to quantify technology innovation progress. And when you're communicating these kind of things, in particular to governments, this is a problem because these intangible outputs, this intangible progress on innovation doesn't easily get the attention of decision makers in governments, but I should also say in industry. And there's always a risk that the priority that innovation should enjoy is being cut back at times of other competing priorities. This is where our new State of Energy Innovation report comes in. We released it earlier this year in April. What we have done in this report is there is no place or no one single metric that we were able to identify, of course, on what is the state of energy innovation is. But what we have done is to assemble a range of data sources and metrics to illustrate the importance of innovation, to highlight progress, and to identify potential action areas, all with a view to assisting decision makers in making the right choices today that can help deliver on key policy goals of tomorrow. Now, when thinking about the importance of energy innovation, just how important it is for the energy sector, I think all of us know. When you think of the RD&D efforts that were undertaken in the 1970s and for nuclear power and the deployment that followed soon thereafter, I think it's very, very obvious. The link is very easily to be seen. Similar when you think of solar PV, which started in the Belts Labs in the United States in the 1950s, took 3 decades or so for the first projects to be commercialized, and then another 3 decades until we achieved 1% of global electricity generation coming from solar PV, with continuous innovation, continuous improvement on the technology side of things. So think about electric cars as the latest, if you want, in the range of important outputs that energy innovation has brought about. But when you think of the importance of energy innovation, it's also very useful to keep in mind that its impacts do not stop at the energy sector. And I can only encourage you to use that as a talking point whenever you're engaging on this matter with other people. Some R&D that was originally undertaken to solve energy challenges found much bigger markets elsewhere and even creating whole new industries. We've put together a couple of examples here. One is lithium-ion batteries, where it's perhaps not commonly known that the inspiration for the initial research into lithium-ion batteries was the problem of storing variable renewable electricity identified during the 1970s oil crisis. 2 decades later, the first mass market for these batteries was in small consumer electronics, enabling proliferation of smartphones in society, and only after they were proven in these markets and cost had come down were they adopted in larger packs for electric cars and stationary power storage, including for renewables, so going back to the original motivation in many ways. Then there's auto-tune technology, which I understand is not to everyone's liking, but it's still in universal use in today's pop music, not to everyone's taste, obviously, but important to remember that the underlying techniques were first developed to aid oil and gas exploration. So another link of the energy sector into other areas. Think about international trade balances, energy trade balances in particular. They also show the fingerprints of energy innovation. The story of hydraulic fracturing and horizontal drilling for unconventional oil and gas is in fact an innovation tale that spans several decades. The real impacts have been seen then only this century as the United States reversed its role in global markets and became the world's largest producer of oil and a net exporter, whereas simultaneously, almost, China, a country that imports over 3/4 of the oil it's using, focused on and then benefited from innovation around electric cars. In 2024, it imported 8% less oil than if all its electric cars had been conventional cars. So a lot of overlaps, a lot of synergies with other parts of the global economy coming from energy innovation. So as I said, we've tried to assemble a couple of metrics here that we found useful to explain a bit what's going on in the innovation space. And we asked ourselves the question, who are the leading innovators? If you think of innovators as countries, obviously innovators are not necessarily countries, but is a good metric to understand what's going on. The answer has been very simple here for years. The main sources of new energy technologies were large industrialized economies in North America, in Europe, Japan, as well as Korea. The patenting of these, the 4 major countries here on this particular chart has been high and relatively constant over a long time. But the latest patent data, and unfortunately latest means 2022 for the purpose of this particular report due to unavoidable lacks in data availability, but this latest patent data shows you that this view of the world just no longer holds. In 2021, China's level of patenting in the energy sector rose to make it the world's top country for annual energy patents. The overwhelming majority of this is directed to areas that can be categorized as low emissions energy technologies, small, modular, mass manufactured low emission energy technologies. So the solar PVs, the batteries, these kind of things. 95%, in fact, of all of China's patents are now for these type of low emission energy technologies. Overall, and that's true at a global level too, low emission technologies now dominate innovation efforts according to patent data, and obviously we recognize that patents are an imperfect measure of energy innovation for a variety of reasons, but that trends are nonetheless an important and in some cases early indicators of priorities within countries and the direction of travel of innovation efforts. Now, looking at the trends in global venture capital, and here venture capital over time is another metric that we thought is useful to bring to attention of everyone. It's worth commenting on this remarkable development that we have seen here over the last 1.5 decades or so. In many ways, it feels a bit like a distant history by now, but it's useful to remember that there was a bust in the sector in 2011 when many investors lost money on clean tech startups that were not able to find markets for their products. This changed considerably, as you can see here, after 2015. You can speculate on the reasons, but our view is that one reason was certainly the much stronger market expectations coming from policy announcements, especially after the signing of the Paris Agreement. Another reason was, of course, the continuous cost declines that we saw in key technologies like solar PV and batteries, in many ways raising confidence in other energy areas. And then from 2021, the post-COVID low interest rate environment drew in much more capital. Unfortunately, the data or this narrative needs an update. The macroeconomic conditions have led to VC fundraising to fall by around 20% for the last 2 years in a row. Of course, there is an argument that there is a good case for some consolidation in some areas, such as electric vehicle manufacturing, but overall this decline that we've been seeing is a risk for energy innovators. Our numbers suggest here that over 1,800 energy startups raised equity in 2021 and 2022, and another 1,400 ever since then. Of course, from an energy perspective, if only a handful of these meet their scale-up goals, it could have significant impact on the energy system, but they will only scale up if they have access to operational capital. If you look now at the trends by technology area, we see that no area has been spared from this decline, although there are bright spots that you cannot necessarily see here, but nuclear, geothermal, and carbon capture utilization and storage are among the technology areas that raised more VC funds in 2024 than in 2023. Now, with all this talk about venture capital, it's also good to keep different sources of finance in perspective. They play very distinct roles in a healthy energy innovation ecosystem, of course, but it's useful to remind ourselves just how large they are. Public R&D budgets in particular fund many of the innovations under development by startups, and they continue to be larger than all global energy VC investing. What is quite remarkable here is that at the peak of energy VC in 2022, as you see here on the right-hand side, the difference narrowed between public R&D and VC almost to parity. But of course, the decline in VC thereafter is a clear reminder that as a source of capital, it can be less reliable for long-term continuity for innovators than if it is complemented by public R&D budgets, and that in many ways goes to the governments that are participating here in this forum today. Of course, there are other ways in which new energy technologies are invented, improved, and then nurtured towards real-world impacts. Corporate research and development departments still spend more on energy-related R&D than public and VC combined. Much of this is on vital incremental improvements and product development to compete on efficiency and price, but good to keep these sizes of funding in a relative perspective. Now finally, with all the data that we've been assembling, and you can find much more in the report as well as on our website, on demonstration projects, on how different countries are prioritizing patents, venture capital, other sources of funding, etc. So there's a whole array of different metrics to look into, also with a view to the breakout sessions that we're going to have later today. There is a special focus on AI, there's one on battery metals and on carbon dioxide removal. So please, if you have time, after this event, don't hesitate to go into the details of this report. But above and beyond the analytical part, we also wanted to make a contribution from the IEA side of things to encourage progress towards commercialization in a number of what we thought are exciting technology areas. And for that purpose, we introduced 18 separate milestones that we designated as international races to first in a sense. They span a number of different policy objectives, from long-term energy security to environmental protection and core science that could generate spillovers. You can find a lot of detail on those 18 races on our website with the associated criteria, and we will update them with project and company developments across 3 phases that we identified for these projects. The first phase is well illustrated by our long-duration energy storage race, which shows that several competitors are already in the first phase, meaning they are building or operating projects that are smaller than full size or in a different configuration. Then in other races, we have consortia that have progressed to the second phase, to the phase of raising funds for an announced project that could potentially meet our criteria. In the case of nuclear SMRs, this is the repeat deployment in different countries. And then when it comes to that third phase, steel is a good example, where there are already 3 projects in construction around the world that have the potential to win the race in the coming years. And if they do so, the technology area will have passed through a key scale-up bottleneck that is essential if the technology is to have a broader impact on energy and emissions. With that, thank you very much for the attention, and back to you, Akshat, now from your seat at the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gul. So I think there's a lot of ideas that we can start to talk about, but we need a few more before we can bring in discussion. So let me have 2 speakers who have prepared remarks for us before I open the floor for discussion. Rosalinde van der Vlies is responsible for Just Transition, Consumers, Energy Efficiency and Innovation at the European Commission's Energy Director General. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here today in the beautiful city of Toronto, and congratulations to the Blue Jays. And I can only conclude that, you know, the IEA logo has the blue of your baseball club, and this cannot be a coincidence that we are here today in Toronto. So it's a pleasure to kick off with a few remarks from the European Commission, and I would like to start a bit with the policy context that I think is very much aligned with what we also heard earlier today from the Canadian Minister, because in the European Union, due to several events, our energy policy has been focusing a lot in the recent years, not only on decarbonization, but very much also on energy security. And I don't need to go into the details of the background to that. And next to energy security, also on the affordability of energy. Affordability of energy, which is a big concern, not only for our European industries, but also for our European citizens. So looking at the impact of this changing policy context with much more focus on the security and affordability, also for innovation, it is very clear that there are 2 objectives that we are facing now with the innovation in the European Union. The first one is to attract massive investments to innovation and to the development of innovative solutions, massive investments not only from the public sector, but also from the private sector. And there, when we look at our European investments in research and development, we can see that we are 2.3% of GDP below of the investments that are happening on research and developments in other regions of the world. And we are particularly lagging behind in Europe by attracting private investments in research and innovation. So in order to fill that gap, we are developing a clean energy investment strategy that aims to really mobilize, in particular, these private investment flows to our priorities of investing in innovation. And earlier this year, we also adopted a specific strategy that is focusing on European startups and scale-ups, where we really would like to stimulate an innovation-friendly environment for, in particular, startups and scale-ups to come to the European Union and to stay in the European Union to develop innovative solutions. So on the priorities that we are having at the European Union when it comes to energy innovation, let me highlight 5 of them. We are targeting our public European investments towards clean tech manufacturing, where we have identified priorities in our so-called Net Zero Industry Act. The second priority that we have identified is innovations in grids, system integration and flexibility. Our third priority is to scale up renewable energies. Our fourth priority is looking into the energy efficiency of buildings and the electrification of the mobility sector and the building sector. And our last priority is looking into digitalization and artificial intelligence. I would also like to congratulate Timur and the IEA for constantly producing very, very high level and inspiring reports. And we are particularly inspired also by the 18 races to firsts. They also coincide very well with the priorities and investments that we are making in the European Union. And there are also specific projects that very much align with these races to the first. In terms of undervalued areas, one of the things that we will be focusing on for in the months and years to come is really the grids. And we have really identified the grids as a major bottleneck in the European Union. So in the coming weeks, we will be coming out with a grids package where we want to, again, stimulate also investments in the grids in the European Union. And from the innovation side, making our grids smarter will be a top priority. So the minister also mentioned the importance of artificial intelligence, and we could not agree more. So at the European Union, we are preparing a strategic roadmap on digitalization and artificial intelligence of the energy sector. And part of this roadmap will be, of course, the importance of international collaboration in this area. So we are also very much welcoming the G7 discussions on this particular topic. So I'll stop here and looking forward very much to the subsequent discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. So we are going to get one more set of prepared remarks. After that, I'm going to open the discussion to the floor. So start thinking about the interventions that you'd like to make. To make your intervention, if you are seated on the table, please take your name card and make it vertical so I know that you are interested in speaking. If you are not on the table, you can raise your hand. There are roving mics that we have volunteers who are looking out for, and they'll draw my attention, so people outside are also welcome to participate in the discussion. So start thinking about your interventions, but before that, let me hear from Cristina Lopez, the Managing Director for Canada Growth Fund.
Thank you. So a bit different, our policy announcements were made by the minister earlier today, and so the Canada Growth Fund is actually a fund that was created by the Government of Canada. It's a $15 billion arm's length investment fund managed by one of Canada's large Maple Lake Pensions, PSP Investments. And so we are a wholly managed subsidiary of that pension, so a professionally managed fund that invests in Canada's innovation sector, both in its traditional and new spaces, to keep Canada globally competitive. And so within that space, we have 3 key verticals. The first vertical is projects, second is clean tech, and the third is low carbon supply chains. To date, over the past 2 years, we've committed $4.75 billion Canadian within those 3 verticals, projects now makes up about $3.72 of that $1 billion, with the most recent announcement that was just made last week with an investment of $2 billion into the Darlington new nuclear project, which is the SMRs that are being constructed here in Ontario. Apparently I'm supposed to say go Blue Jays. I'm from Alberta. And so that is an example of catalyzing capital in order to do those races to first that were spoken about. The second is clean tech. We have a portfolio company sitting in the room, Ever Technologies, which is actually the first deployment of capital by the Canada Growth Fund, which is a geothermal technology company actually building a project in Germany. So shows that collaboration across borders as well, building technology in Canada, exporting that technology around the world. And so within that vertical, we have 3 streams of investments. We do direct investments, as we did with Ever, as well as others. We have fund level investments where we invest in funds, and then with those fund level investments, we will participate in co-invests. And we just completed our first co-investment, which was in a windows framing company based in Vancouver. And the last one is low carbon supply chains. This is really to catalyze the abundance of natural resources that Canada has been blessed with. And that is our newest vertical. We've made 2 investments in that space, one in an upstream graphite mine in Quebec, and the other in a zinc and copper mine in Saskatchewan. And so those are actually direct investments into public companies, where again, we are catalyzing external capital. So this really is a fund that has been designed for that critical missing middle that John Stackhouse was mentioning earlier today, and really being able to bridge that gap and have the patience that is required and the patient capital that is required in order to catalyze projects across Canada, but also the innovation that can be exported around the globe by Canadian innovators. So within that, it is looking at creative financial structures. We'll invest across the capital stack, equity, debt, structured products, and really, again, the mandate is innovation and catalyzation and that missing middle, which I'm thinking of probably address a lot today through various conversations.
Wonderful. So the floor is open now. Just a reminder that your contributions are going to feed into directly the ministerial conversations happening at the G7 tomorrow. So what you say will have immediate impact. But throughout the day, we've had a chance to touch on new technologies. We've had a chance to touch on what are the difficulties in scaling up those technologies, what type of financial routes are available for bringing these technologies on board. And yeah, I'd welcome remarks from anybody on any of those topics, but also any other ideas that you would like to share with the room.
Hi, good morning. My name is Inga Petersen. I represent the Global Battery Alliance, and I have a question for the colleague from the European Commission. I read an interesting summary yesterday that basically posited that Europe has bet on regulation when it comes to clean energy transition, the US on access to raw materials, and China on manufacturing. I'm just wondering if the EU really wants to double down on building capacity and ramping up manufacturing for clean energy technologies. Does that inevitably come at the cost of deregulation, or can we maintain that focus on sustainability regulations while also ramping up investment in manufacturing and that capacity? Thank you.
Thank you very much, and very, very timely and very good question. I think it's very clear that at the moment the European Union is focusing very much on competitiveness. So we are transforming our green agenda also into a competitiveness agenda. And one of the things that we have heard from companies is that we have too many rules inside the European Union, we are too bureaucratic, and it's too complicated for the companies. So we have started with an agenda on simplification simplification of our regulatory environment in order to attract and keep businesses inside the European Union. Now, there's a lot of confusion around this exercise of regulatory simplification, where there's a lot of fear from many companies that this regulatory simplification will also lead to deregulation. So our narrative is that we want to simplify the regulatory environment for our companies. At the same time, we want to provide long-term stability, and also we don't want to deregulate. So we are going through an exercise where we are looking into all the rules that we have inside the European Union. We are looking into simplification potential, and then we are proposing what we call in our administrative world omnibuses of regulatory simplification, with the idea to make the rules simpler for our businesses, to also attract new businesses to the European Union. And I mentioned the Scale-Up Fund that we are establishing as part of the Startup and Scale-Up strategy. This is really a strategy to welcome innovators and young companies to come to the European Union. But the idea of the exercise is not that we want to deregulate. So we want to keep our ambition, but we want to make the rules less bureaucratic and simpler for the businesses in order to strengthen the competitiveness. And the Net Zero Industry Act, to mention an example, is one of the legislative measures that we have taken to simplify the lives of the businesses and bring them to the European Union.
Can I ask a follow-up question? So if we bring it to a little bit more specific, what lessons do you think the European Union and the European Commission has taken from what happened with Northvolt?
Yeah, that is a very good question indeed. I think one of the things that is very important for the European Commission, and this is reflected actually in our proposals for the next multi-annual financial framework. So we have a lot of funding, public funding opportunities for companies inside the European Union. But if you look at the funding schemes today, there are many different funds. We have Horizon Europe, that is providing funding for research and development. Then we have the Innovation Fund, that focuses more on the market deployment. We also have InvestEU. We have the LIFE program. So we have many different programs that provide funding to companies at different stages in the innovation chain. And one of the shortcomings that we identified is that there are different eligibility criteria for each of these funds. So it gets very complicated also for companies to have a kind of like, stability and, when we move up in the innovation chain, to have a continuous and stable source of funding from the European Union. So as part of our multi-annual financial framework proposal for 2027 and onwards, we try to simplify this, and we come forward with what we call a European Competitiveness Fund, where we would like to make sure that companies have simple rules if you want to get access to EU funding, also that we speed up, because sometimes simply, from the moment a company makes, a proposal to receive EU funding, sometimes the time lag can be up to 1 year or even longer. So for some companies, this is not attractive anymore either. So we want to simplify and really speed up and have like one-stop shop for the companies, so that we can make sure that we can provide a framework that covers the entire innovation chain. I think one of the big lessons we learned is that in the European Union, we are great in science. So we are basically a scientific powerhouse, but we're not really good at reaping the commercial benefits of the science that we have developed. So this is a big challenge that we hope to address in our next multi-annual financial framework.
And one more follow-up on that, which is, so if you look at what happened with Northvolt is, they had to import a lot of technology either coming from South Korea or from China, especially on equipment manufacturing, so battery equipment manufacturing. A lot of it did come from South Korea and China. Timur's chart there showed very clearly how China is now on, at least in patents, showing a level of innovation that surpasses those of many of the Western countries' past performances. There is some move to try and get European companies to either partner with Chinese companies or enable technology transfer from China or from other countries. How is the European Union thinking about those issues? Because if you're looking at competitiveness, the fastest way to speed up is to use the technologies that are available to you already, but then do so in Europe itself, right?
Exactly. So there we are developing an Industrial Accelerator Act, formerly known as the Industrial Decarbonization Accelerator Act, but now it's an Industrial Accelerator Act. And one of the things that we are looking up indeed is to see, how can we ensure security of supply. And there we are focusing on made in Europe requirements, including on foreign direct investments. So this is an act that is under development and that is expected to address precisely the issues that you mentioned. And we hope to come forward with this act still this year in order to make sure that we can address the security of supply issues for our European industries and strengthen the manufacturing base, the clean tech manufacturing base inside the European Union.
Can I jump in really quickly? And look, as an investor, I focus on patents a lot and making sure we have patents and the patents stay Canadian if we're investing in a Canadian company. But what we aren't focusing enough on is the trade secret that doesn't get patented. And that is a critical part of just innovation actually getting commercialized. A patent is a piece of paper which protects your innovation, but people will have small tweaks to that and then suddenly they patent that. The trade secret really is for lack of a better word, it's the secret sauce. And we transferred a lot of that knowledge in the manufacturing base when we seeded sort of back manufacturing excellence to the Asian world, which is something that they have then taken and really improved on. And it's now we need to sort of learn some of these trade secrets back. So it's not just using Chinese technology to accelerate it, it's actually going to be training our people with that new technology as well and learning some of these trade secrets.
And do you have examples of where that is already happening?
Well, the example was Northvolt. It was a great example of that, right? And not utilizing that in the same way. So we're going to continue to be able to see that.
If I may quickly jump in there, I mean, we had under our current Horizon Europe program, we have an opportunity to object to technology transfer. But this objection has been rarely used. So we have basically consortia of companies that we are funding, and then if we see that the knowledge is being transferred outside of the European Union, there is an opportunity to object to that. And I think this is something that, a tool, I mean, we have it on paper, but in practice it is only exceptionally applied. And I think this is also something that, we need to look into to really see how we are going to protect that. So I fully agree with your comment there.
Well, I wanted to ask you a question on nuclear. So, there is I would say, renaissance in interest in nuclear. And that's been driven by partly because of electricity demand growth. We are hearing deals now, I would say, every other week about either nuclear plant being a new nuclear plant being considered or an old nuclear plant being reopened. SMRs are one of the ways in which new nuclear could come to bear, and you've funded this $2 billion worth of SMRs that are supposed to be built in Canada. When they do get built, they would be the first SMR in Western countries. So current commercial SMRs for domestic use are in Russia and in China. And we also know from history that China has been able to scale up nuclear much faster, just traditional nuclear. So what is it that SMRs need to have the same sort of momentum in innovation to actually deliver on their promise?
Policy. That's it. It is how quickly can you get approvals in place. Ontario, to their credit, is a nuclear producing province already. And I was at a conference, a Bloomberg conference actually in April, and they referred to the approvals that were taken and the way that Ontario has addressed nuclear as being lightning speed in the policy approvals. And so that if you are going to accelerate nuclear, you just need now, no one's saying that at the expense of safety. And so nuclear, obviously, safety is a critical element in that plate, in sort of getting nuclear built. But policy is going to be critically important. And then beyond that, now it's going to be fuel as well, right? And so Canada is really blessed with a very large, high-quality uranium resource. And so even getting the approvals in place to be able to extract the uranium and then produce fuel is critically important.
So I see we've got interest. I'll just go in this order because it's easier. But can I start there, please? Introduce yourself and then make your intervention.
Thank you. I have a comment and a quick question. I hope that's okay. Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Sarah Jordan. I'm an associate professor at McGill University. First, I wanted to start by saying thank you for all the excellent presentations. It's great to see all the new innovators and all the research that's going on at the International Energy Agency. What I did note, and also building on the comment of SMR and from the announcements this morning, I feel like there's a huge underemphasized opportunity for creative cross-sectoral innovation in all of the key topic areas that we are addressing. For example, this morning we saw deployment of CDR for nickel mining and that innovation being enabled by that particular sector. In 2024, we held a battery circularity workshop at McGill, so addressing critical mineral issues, where we brought together leaders from Canada, the United States, and Europe. So I'm hoping that there will be some comments as well from Europe, being real leaders in the area of waste management from batteries. But among the key solutions that we determined was not only recycling and repurposing, but looking for some of these integrated opportunities like vehicle to grid. For critical materials and many of the other areas, I really feel like there's this need, much like decarbonization, for a portfolio approach where we're taking all opportunities at once to ensure that we really capitalize on them where possible. But we need to also acknowledge major challenges in circularity, also with grid integration, the European Commission's comments, and also from the innovators on the panel. So battery circularity, for example, includes 10 Rs and a lot of different options from design for disassembly to lifetime extension. And so when we think about fully realizing opportunities, we need to realize those real limitations, like inverter loading for vehicle to grid, for example, or safety. That's something we often think it's really easy to repurpose. So I wanted to bring this up as a really important aspect that we need to think about, where we have to, in order to fully realize these opportunities, we need to think through standards as guidelines for safety and other aspects, but also regulations such that we're not inhibiting, we're enabling policy. And that, in my view, something that can help really support the advancement of innovation through deployment, because sometimes we miss the systems integration piece very easily, and that part is so critical.
Thank you. Next.
Thank you very much. My name is Torben Norgard. I represent an organization called Mærsk Mc-Kinney Møller Center for Zero Carbon Shipping. A comment to Mr. Stackhouse' presentation, and at the end, I would appreciate if Christina Lopez, if you could reflect a little bit. It's on the topic of making capital available for these innovative technologies that are required for driving low-emission energy systems forward. Reflect on what Mr. Stackhouse referred to as the new long term, which is 6 months. I think that's a rare development we recognize at our Center for Zero Carbon Shipping, and it's a concern that the new long term actually is quite short in terms of deploying these technologies. There was a reference to that we need to see more, maybe government-led investments to cover these very expensive phases where we take innovation from first concept through demonstration to something that is commercial. We recognize that in our projects, for instance, Green Corridor, where we activate new technologies at scale as a demonstrator to in our case, decarbonize the maritime value chain. One recommendation towards how this capital can be deployed is not necessarily as direct investment, but also what was referred to by Mr. Stackhouse as something that provides a credit risk to these developments as they scale and mature towards something that is commercial. Which then leads me towards Ms. Lopez, where I was very happy to learn that and understand that you have more patient capital, which then I would assume is something that is slightly more long-term than the new long-term. So with the recommendation from me to the G7 meeting tomorrow around this, deployment of patient capital and maybe deploying it through, several means, but including offering credit risk to deploying innovation. I would appreciate also a few reflections from Ms. Lopez on how we can, enhance and increase the availability of patient capital and what would be the right way of deploying it most effectively.
I think we need to separate long-term into two buckets. Long-term that uses bits and long-term that uses screwdrivers. Or any other power tool. Anything that's hard tech versus something that is software. In software, in the world of AI, long term, yes, you can talk about 6 months. You can't build in 6 months. You can't debug in 6 months. And not just debugging software, now we're talking about something like a Lego piece. And if you're taking somebody told me it's like the Death Star, it's like their hardest Lego. And I'm like, and imagine you did one thing wrong and you have to take it all back apart again. Like this is building very hard infrastructure. But we can't do it as slowly as we have been doing it. So I think that's part of it, and slow in the sense of minds being developed, in the sense of building technologies. We have to find ways to accelerate that without skipping steps, because if we skip steps, then we end up in situations where you do have these larger bankruptcies, and then we all are just self-reflecting and not really recognizing that, at the end of the day, there's actually lessons learned and people trained, and it actually creates part of the ecosystem. Failure is not considered a bad thing. But VC funding, and we saw that chart, VC crowded in thinking you could get software style returns and timeframes with hard technologies. And it just, there's a physical limitation to that. So we also have to have that patient capital. What we're finding is the people that are patient tends to be strategics and governments. And then if it's going to be governments participating as part of this, it's how do we also create the benefit for the taxpayers by not just being subsidies, but being investors. And then having that patient time horizon where you don't have a fund life that you're dealing with. That's 7 years long, but a technology takes longer than that to fully commercialize, from bench scale to commercialization. So you have that patience. But then there's also the rewards that come with it, and the acceptance of failure.
Thank you. One quick follow-up, and we've got a number of interventions coming up, so I wanted to ask you, but specifically, we've had the failure of the IMO to get the net zero framework signed off, a couple of weeks ago. There is the vote is supposed to happen again in a year's time, but just so that people have some perspective, regulatory changes like that could have made a big difference in accelerating zero carbon shipping. How much do you think the IMO vote affects what you are doing?
Appreciate that follow-up question, and what has also been mentioned several times by the many speakers here is that policy really matters. In terms of driving the uptake and adoption of new technology, in particular hardware, I agree very much that we need to separate between software and hardware, and they have completely different horizons and dynamics. Energy innovation, when we look at the hardware side, which is very much what sort of the major investments here are about, yes, the drivers are either customer pull or regulation, and customer pull is a rather weak driver and probably will remain so we need to look at policy. The lack of conclusion at the IMO session a couple of weeks ago is actually, a missed opportunity to take a step forward for one select value chain, in this case, maritime to enhance their ability to actually pay for solutions and bring them to something that looks like a commercial value proposition. I like to think of it as a missed opportunity to take a step forward. It's often been presented as a setback. Well, actually, the reality is that the world looks exactly the same today as it did 3 weeks ago. So it's a missed opportunity for a step forward. If you look at what's driving the implementation here, actually, we look more towards national and regional policy regimes that enable energy developments at a system level, where maritime plays a part together with any other industry segment that consumes energy. And those are some of the main drivers, and they are still very much on track, and we see growing momentum. We see hydrogen banks in Europe, we see hydrogen auctions in Australia, contracts for differences for import of hydrogen derivatives in Korea and Japan and in Singapore, US Inflation Reduction Act, so on and so forth. And those are some of the main things that we consider. So the IMO, yes, a missed opportunity, but not a setback.
Thanks. Next.
Hello, and thank you very much, everyone, for the excellent input. I want to bring back the discussion on diversifying battery mineral supplies, which is critical for the G7 energy security. My name is Gada Nafi, and I'm the CEO of a company called Litis. We have found a niche for ourselves. We've heard earlier about lithium and how we can extract it from sources as unconventional as oil field produced water. With that, we brought the technology from lab scale to a field unit operational in large scale, showing proven success. This technology unlocks entirely new low concentration domestic sources in Canada, in the US, and in Europe, where you typically see low concentrations. And what we're looking at and what we're thinking is there appears to be a gap in funding opportunities between projects that may be perceived to be more advanced and less funding for new technologies or innovation that maybe are not perceived so. This risk aversion is pronounced, especially when speaking to private investors or to VCs, and it's an area where we need to find a way where governments can embrace all new technology that have reasonable chance of success. With that, we're looking for an ecosystem that fosters support for different technologies along the TRL, as long as there's that proven success that can allow companies to go to that commercial scale. What we're thinking is ways where the government prioritizes and de-risks what we would think of as a first-of-a-kind commercial plant using a specific innovative technology that has been proven to rapidly secure the critical mineral supply chain outside of the traditional regions.
Do you want to go next?
Hi, my name is Shatha Clavering, and I am from the Loss and Climate Institute at the University of Toronto. My question is to Rosalind, actually. You touched on a very important topic that the European Union is about 2.2% lower in R&D spending in comparison to other jurisdictions. And that resonates very well with us at the university from early stage R&D perspective. And also we saw on the slides that industry R&D is $160 billion, the corporate R&D that they spent, and it's 4 times the government spending on R&D. It has been challenging for us. I've been doing that for the past 4 years. This is like my day and night. Every minute of my day is spent on how can I attract capital from corporate into the university to do our R&D early stage, because the universities are no more on the sidelines. They are at the heart of the energy transition, and they are the hub for innovation and R&D. So my question to you, you mentioned that there are policies to drive private investment. So I would love to hear from you how the European Union is thinking about encouraging corporates to invest more in universities' R&D. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. And indeed, I mean, we had set actually as an objective in the European Union to invest 3% of GDP in R&D. So this is the objective we have, but as I said, we are still at 2.3%. So in order to attract more private investments also in universities, one of the tools that we have been successfully using are European partnerships, where we are bringing together the universities and companies and the European Commission into a partnership around specific topics. And there we can see that these partnerships have been working really well in order to bring the different actors together. So this is one of the tools that we will continue also to use in the future. And then I mentioned the new fund that will be set up. This is the Scale Up Europe Fund, but there we will be mainly focusing on stimulating private investors and pairing them with institutional investors like the European Investment Bank. But this is really to bring the startup and scale-ups to the European Union. But I think in the new setup in the next MFF, we will continue with Horizon Europe, because of course we are talking here about the lower TRL investments. And there I think the partnerships that are established under the Horizon Europe program are probably one of the most successful tools to bring together the universities with the companies in order to invest jointly.
Thank you. I see there are 9 people who want to speak, and we have about 15 minutes. So I'm going to take them on, but if you can keep your remarks brief, that would be helpful. Maybe we can start from the far end there.
Yes, thank you. My name is Johanna, and I represent the IETS TCP, one of the TCPs of the IEA. Thank you very much for today. It's been very interesting, and also thank you very much for the report on state of energy innovation. I think that's a really good basis where we can use as a discussion going further. I would like to highlight the fact that we see that with all this, not only energy innovation, but innovation in general, many of the new technologies and solutions that we see emerging are cross-cutting, and they create industrial convergence or industrial merge-up. And we have many examples, not least in the bio-based industries, where we can question if biorefineries are a part of the refinery industry, the chemical process industry, the energy sector, or the pulp and paper industry, or maybe from the agricultural sector. We can also see those examples with hydrogen and methanol being both chemical commodities and really important for energy innovation and energy transition. And also with CDR and CO2 emission technologies. And what I would like to highlight is that we see that many of those new and emerging companies and technologies, when they go into scaling and emerging the markets, they are, they are faced with challenges due to that the regulatory system is designed for incumbent industries and value chains. And we face unnecessary hurdles in order to get to market. So what I would like to highlight is that I see a need for further discussion on how we can ease and speed up cross-cutting innovation between different sectors and reduce the regulatory hurdles and ease good standards that make it easier for the new cross-cutting technologies to come in place. I would also like to see how we could further develop those analyses that I think that the State of Energy Innovation report is a really good first step, but if we could also further embrace and show those emergent cross-cutting segments of new industry and innovation. So thank you very much for those discussions, and I look forward to continue.
Thank you. Next, the person next to you.
Good morning, thank you. My name is John Bucknell. I'm the CEO and founder of Vertisolis Technologies. My planned remarks were not brief, but I will make them brief in recognition of having the other people speak. The energy innovation is a very important topic in a commodity field. I would note that using the EIA's own data, globally we spend about 12% of global GDP on energy alone. And that is in contrast with the periods of large prosperity growth in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, where we are at 2 to 3% of global GDP on energy. So addressing the need for affordable, clean, firm power, we need to reverse the course of what we are planning as far as deployment of new energy technologies, and affordability needs to be a large portion of that. And you might note that globally we're about $75 a megawatt hour in US money on energy, and that target needs to be down around 20, and that's across everything. There are markets globally that are between $350 and $500 a megawatt hour. That's very challenging. You might note Germany in particular has had a challenge around that because of those costs and its impending deindustrialization. So we are a manufacturer of a clean, firm baseload power. It's called Space Solar Power if you want to talk to me later, but I will yield the floor to the next speaker.
Thank you. The person next to you.
Hi, my name is Brian Foodie. I'm the CEO of Iogen. We're the only company to successfully develop commercial-scale, profitable cellulosic biofuel technology. This is now rolling out at the billion-dollar scale in Brazil. Based on my experience, a key barrier to innovation is a lack of certainty about the solidity of market opportunities, essentially a question about the rewards one would get for success. One policy that has worked incredibly well is ambitious mandates for deployment. They've attracted billions of dollars in investment in innovation. Ideally, they'd come with robust safety valves and contracts for difference. As you consider policies to promote innovation, please think about establishing large, robust market signals, because that is the best way to draw private sector money into investments, and the private sector will spread that money around, including to universities.
Thank you. I see Korea is, the Korea card is up. Is there the one next to you? No? Okay, you can go next.
Yeah, but I don't think I'm Korean. All right, Brian Watson from Cleantech North and the Ontario Cleantech Industry Association. I'll be very brief. I just want to highlight a tool that has been rolled out in Canada that has been showing some good effect recently, which was legislated last June. The Clean Economy Tax Credits referenced by the Minister, CCUS, hydrogen, these are all different tax credits, CCUS, hydrogen, clean technology, so for the deployment of clean technologies, capital cost, and clean technology manufacturing, which also includes the manufacturing of critical materials and minerals and other items for the clean technology ecosystem. These tax credits are, there are some risks, there are some issues in terms of bankability that can be addressed, but they are attracting private capital, and really we're starting to see them drive deployment and adoption of clean technologies at all levels, from data centers to geothermal to CCUS plants. So please consider and take a look at those tax credits. It'd be lovely to see some harmonization across those tax credits, as well as the technologies across the various different regional jurisdictions that are being focused on, and some harmonization of those technologies. Because in Canada, I think the latest standard that we're using is 2019 level of technology that is what is being used at NRCan for those tax credits. So I'll pass the floor.
Thank you. Next to you.
Yeah. I didn't want to ask a question, but I feel a lot of peer pressure here. So we have Europe and Canada at the table, and my name is Nima Mogimian from NanoExplore in Montreal. My question for you is, what are some of the interesting ideas and policies that you see in Europe that have worked and you would like to bring to Canada and the other way around? Putting you on the spot here.
I'm not the policy expert, I'm the investor. But look, I think what Europe has done very well is create levels of certainty for companies that invest in the country, and policy uncertainty is really damaging, right? Because policy can change suddenly faster and more negatively than the technology can necessarily be developed from bench scale to commercialization. And so we have seen some of that, and we've started to bring some of that to Canada as well. You know, I think that that's been a really critical tool, and will continue to be, is just sort of bringing some of that policy certainty that Europe has in place. we need to just make sure that our approvals are fast and moving along as well, because I think we're both mired in our own bureaucracies.
I mean, I'll throw a bomb in there and say, Canada at some point was considering being part of the European Union, and apparently there is a shared border with the European Union that Canada has. So the fastest way to bring in European regulations would be to become part of the European Union.
Okay, I'll take that message home to Brussels. Thank you for that. Well, I mean, I think first of all, it's important to recognize that the European Union, it cannot be compared to one country. Because we're actually, bringing together 27 countries, and there still is a lot of decision power by the individual member states of the European Union. So from that perspective, it's kind of like difficult to compare EU as a whole to Canada as a country. Of course, indeed, what we are known to, and that's also what the lady over there said, that we have a lot of regulations in the European Union where we basically try to harmonize and create a level playing field inside the European Union and to have benefits from, what we call the internal market of the European Union. But I think one of the things that we can probably learn from countries like Canada is, apart from, these regulations that then apply in the 27 member countries of the European Union, is to see how we can go to a faster deployment. And for instance, the gentleman next to you mentioned the tax credits. This is of course very important, but if you look at the division of competences, taxation matters are still matters that remain the competences of the member states of the European Union. So it's very difficult, to harmonize these things at a European level unless you have a unanimous approval from all the EU member countries. But I think one of the things that we try to catch up with, is to keep the regulatory stability, but to simplify our rules and to accelerate deployment and private investments. Thank you.
Thank you. Next to you.
So thank you. Matti Malkamäki, my name, from company Hycamite. We are splitting methane, natural gas, biomethane into low carbon hydrogen and solid carbon. For this one, we did receive from European Commission the strategic project status earlier this year. We are one of the 47 strategic projects and therefore seeing a lot of possibilities in the future. But my comment here for the EIA and then for the whole community is on the regulation side. So we are now raising our next series investment round, and when we are preparing for the materials, we are seeing that one of the risks that what we actually have in the global business is actually regulation, because it's so different in various parts of the world. And if you compare, for example, the hydrogen regulation, we have the new coming ISO 19870-1 that sets rules for how to calculate the the life cycle emissions. But then if you go to any different countries, say Japan, European Union, UK, USA, Canada, you have your own regulations. And this is a risk that all the investors are seeing, that how it can be tackled. One good example of this risk on the regulation side, on the new, so to say, value chains that was referred here earlier, is that if we are making this kind of graphite production facility in Europe and we are producing actually excess low carbon hydrogen, and somebody wants to make ammonia out of it, then we can do that, but because the new low carbon hydrogen delegated act in Europe that is coming in place states differently, so we can sell that ammonia as a low carbon hydrogen to USA, to UK, to Norway, but not within Europe. So this kind of risks and regulation, I think that this regulation loophole should be somehow looked after by an agency, so that we can see that how we can harmonize this kind of new regulatory issues throughout the whole world. Thanks.
Thank you. Your list is becoming longer. Next.
Lucio Mesquita, I'm the chair of the Solar Heating and Cooling TCP. And this is just a call for action. Right? We have 50% of the energy end uses for heating around the world. It's a sector that is lagging other sectors in terms of decarbonization, is not on track. And we have many options: thermal networks, district heating, cooling, heat pumps, thermal storage, solar heating and cooling, either through solar thermal or PV. So this is just a call for action, because I think we need specific policies and actions for innovation in the heating sector. Right? If not, we'll continue to lag behind other sectors. And if you are 50% of the end use, we are not going to reach our decarbonization goals. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Vita, co-founder and co-CEO of TerraFixing, Director of Carbon Capture based here in Canada. I have a question directed to Christina Lopez from Canada Growth Fund. As we heard from Dr. Gould's presentation, he pointed out that if even a fraction of the companies that are looking to scale reach their scaling potential, the amount of power that we need, really we need a lot of it. Really happy to hear about all of these new projects that are coming on in SMRs. Thinking about Canada's far north and how our northern communities are still reliant on diesel and other things, what do you see as being the greatest barriers to us not being able to reach energy independence in the far north? And then on top of that, so once we reach energy independence, then to have that additional power so that we can move projects along, like in carbon capture and other things. What are the greatest barriers that you see that we can bring to the IEA in tomorrow's discussions to help to accelerate us?
All right, I had to get that out. The far north is a challenge. It's a challenge for everything. It's a challenge for infrastructure like roads. It's a challenge for power. It is one of the reasons why diesel is used, right? It's a very movable fuel. It's a very diverse, diverse fuel that can be utilized. It can be stored. It doesn't degrade under the cold weather in the same way. Now, again, there's cloud points that you have to kind of consider when you're talking about diesel. And so the decarbonizing of diesel, this is one of the reasons why you really need to look at things like renewable diesels and blending that in to reduce it. There's no silver bullet for every jurisdiction. It's not an area, the far north doesn't get a lot of sun. Doesn't necessarily have a ton of wind. So renewables in a traditional sense of wind and solar don't necessarily work as well. So you can't necessarily just apply a solar farm with battery backup storage. That's not really a tool for the far north. And so we really do have to think more about renewable fuels and blending with those renewable fuels and accepting that some areas are just very, very difficult to decarbonize. Geothermal could be another area if you've got the right geothermal heat gradient. But again, there's elements of difficulty, and I think we need to focus on that, but without losing our focus on the low-hanging fruit as well and infrastructure that's already built out.
Thanks.
Dave. Sorry, and we can't burn the north with incremental costs. It's already expensive to be up north.
Hey. Dave Greenshields from Ontario Power Generation. We're the recipient of some of this funding, so thank you. I do want to thank Christina for actually mentioning safety, because while OPG, we spent a lot of time thinking about the future and how we're going to build out for all this AI and to keep the lights on. None of it matters if we can't get people home safely, so it's the #1 thing that we do. We've talked a lot about innovation and new technologies, but I kind of want to bring it back down to something that I think about a lot, like with a company that builds these mega projects, these nation-building projects that you kind of think about. We think a lot about human capital, and we think about how we're going to deploy that human capital and the modularization of construction. I was reading a few studies that said that we're going to lose 700,000 electricians, plumbers, those people, over the next couple of years. We're going to need 1.2 million trade jobs by 2033. That's what I think the G7 might focus their efforts on. How do we actually enable this technology future? How do we actually have enough people to build all these things that we want to build? It's incredibly important when we think about solutions in the north, and we're modularizing energy for deployment up there. We still have to have people to build it. So I would like to just maybe ground the conversation a little bit, and you still need people to do all this stuff. But thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
We've got last 2 remarks and then a coffee break, which I'm sure everybody wants. So please go ahead.
Thank you very much.
So good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. My name is Isham Amara. I'm here from Electra, the distribution company, one of the largest in North America. One of the questions I wanted to kind of bring focus to here, a lot of discussion on technology innovation. I think it's really important and critical. However, what I'm kind of hearing is a bit of a gap around regulatory innovation. I think that's really critical for us to bring that forward because of the fact that I think it is a significant barrier. And I say this from somebody who works in a sector that's very risk averse. I'll give you a bit of quantification here, for food for thought at least. I think one of the first key areas we need to look at from regulation is, are we enabling those sectors, especially the industries that are, and I'll say this quite effectively, is that we don't have many carrots, there's a lot of sticks. When power goes out, nobody's happy, but nobody pats us on the shoulder because the power's on right now. Because all here can congratulate me that the power is on. So I think the idea is, how do you incentivize that sector? How do you make innovation core to their actual regulatory framework? It isn't. It is kind of a sideshow. You have an innovation department, but it doesn't really go beyond that. And I think that's really critical for us to kind of look at how we enable regulation to bring into the sectors that's business as usual for them. I think that's one of the key areas. The other part is also around how we build the system itself, how we extract value from the system. Right now, there's a lot of, I would say, inefficiency in the system, but we're not incentivized to move in that direction. We don't extract more value out of the existing infrastructure, and that's predominantly because of regulation. And also predominantly because of our operating model that's stuck in the 1960s. We build and operate the system as if it was built in the 60s and 70s. Yeah, and I think we need to kind of change our framework and look at this. And it's not a technology challenge in a lot of areas, it's actually a regulatory challenge. So I think there has to be a push for innovation. This is an Innovation Forum to really look at that framework. Is how do we incentivize large companies who build infrastructure that lasts 50 plus years, who to a lot of people in the audience here mentioned are an actual bottleneck to the innovation, the adoption of this technology. How can they be a critical pathway for innovation? And it starts with the low-hanging fruit, by the way. It's not the difficult areas. It's actually the small areas, and simplicity, I think, will actually sufficiently support the sector. And I'll applaud, I'm not sure there's any from the UK here, the UK has led the way around this. The Rio framework for regulation has opened up innovation in the United Kingdom quite considerably. So there's an example there that could be emulated and improved upon for sure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tyler Hamilton from Mars Discovery District here in Toronto. A couple of questions I just wanted to pose, and it's been brought up here in a variety of comments. One is this issue of urgency. Obviously, we need policy to address the urgency of getting technology to market, helping it scale. But related to that, how do we get that policy introduced and executed with a sense of urgency? Speaking from the Canadian experience, I feel like there's a long lag time between stated intentions to policy development, to policy execution, to money out the door. It doesn't move at the pace of innovation, and we work with startups, and those startups can't wait 2-3 years for money to roll out the door. So that's one question. The other one is, how do governments, and I think Christina mentioned this, is just kind of having an appreciation that failure can be a good thing. Obviously, you don't want too much failing, but learning those lessons and trying to create a culture where every headline that appears in the newspaper doesn't cause like a massive backing up of we're not going to go there. And even with failure, government controversy, right? Stuff happens. We had a great program in Canada, Sustainable Development Technology Canada. Companies are suffering because a controversy around how it was run derailed and basically killed a program that had been in effect for 25 years and had been respected worldwide. So how do we kind of introduce that acceptance of risk when it comes to urgency and embrace of failure? Thank you.
Great. I think we can close on that if you want to add anything, and those would be the final remarks.
Look, from an investor's lens, again, not the policy creator's lens, when we listen to John Stackhouse speak about 6 months is now a long time in Silicon Valley, we need to bring some of that mentality into how do we advance regulation. And I think we're realizing now more than ever, capital is fungible. And it will move wherever the least barriers are being created for that capital. And I think we're seeing that now. We're seeing that everyone wants that capital. That foreign direct investment is absolutely critical. And so hopefully we'll start to see the policies follow suit in order to compete for that foreign direct investment, but without it all being in the form of subsidies, because taxpayers are not capable of those burdens.
Okay, maybe very quickly, because I see many people longing for a wonderful coffee break. On the regulatory innovation, I think it's a really very important point. Here I wanted to draw the attention that from the European Commission, we are very much promoting the concept of regulatory sandboxes, where basically, at the national level, the national governments would allow innovative companies that would bring a solution to the market to get some free space, so not be hindered by existing rules that may exist that would hamper actually bringing the innovation to the market. So I think this is something that we attach big importance to, in particular when it comes to bringing energy innovations to the market. Then on the acceleration, again, what we are focusing on, for instance, is encouraging member states to reduce permitting periods. I think this is a very big on our European agenda, so to really be able to speed up. And I would also like to pick up on the point by the gentleman on the human capital. I think that is indeed very, very important that we also take this into consideration. One of the things that we have been proposing at the European level in the Net Zero Industry Act is to establish academies in different energy technologies in order to make sure that we have the skilled workforce also for the future. But I do think that it's a very important point that should be addressed internationally. And for the rest, I bring a long list with me back to Brussels. So I would like to thank everybody for great interventions and for the energy and inspiration in this morning debate. Thank you.